The chicken was dry. I knew that before I set the platter on the table. I'd left it in the oven 10 minutes too long. STA ring at the refrigerator magnets SA Ra had made an elementary school, thinking about nothing and everything at once. Mark was already at his seat, scrolling through something on his phone with the kind of focused irritation he reserved for work emails that arrived after 6. He didn't look up when I put the platter down, didn't comment on the slight cha or a round the edges of the skin. That was fine. I'd stopped expecting comments years ago. S.A. Ross late again, he said, not as a question, traffic. I said it automatically, the way I always did. I'd been saying traffic for 3 years now, ever since she'd moved back home after her first job fell through, ever since she'd este route at Caldwell Logistics, and begun coming home with shadows under her eyes that I pretended not to see. Mark grunted and reached for the serving spoon. She could call. She could text. It's not the 1800s. She's an adult, Mark. She doesn't have to check in with us. She lives in our house. She eats our food. She could send a text. I didn't argue. There was no point. We'd been having variations of this same conversation since S.A. Ra had walked through the front door with her boxes and her resume and her reefily bright smile that I'd recognized because it was the same one I used to wear when I was pretending everything was fine. I'd known then, the moment she'd said the job market was tough and she just needed a few months to get back on her feet, that she wasn't telling me the whole story. But I'd let it go because that was what I did. I let things go and I waited for them to resolve themselves, and I pretended the waiting wasn't eating me alive from the inside out. The front door clicked open at 7:15. I heard S.A. Ross' footsteps in the hallway. Heard the familiar thud of her work bag hitting the floor. She'd been doing that since she was 16, dropping her backpack in the same spot by the same coat rack, and I'd stopped nagging her about it because some battles weren't worth winning. Sorry I'm late, she said, walking into the dining room. She was still wearing her work clothes, a navy blazer that was slightly too big for her, the kind of inexpensive department store suit that young accountants bought when they couldn't afford anything better. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and there was a crease between her eyebrows that hadn't been there a year ago. Meeting ran over. Eat while it's warm, I said, gesturing at her empty chair. I'll get you a plate. I can get it myself, Mom. Sit down. But I was already in the kitchen, pulling a plate from the cabinet, dishing out chicken and potatoes that had gone cold while we waited. I'd been doing this her whole life, making sure she was fed even when she didn't ask, even when she said she could do it herself. It was the only way I knew how to say I loved her, because I'd never been good with the actual words. When I brought the plate to the table, S.A. Ra had the manila folder out. It was fat, the kind of folder that meant business, the kind I'd seen 100 times in my own CA rear. She was STA ring at it like it contained something that might bite her. I have something to tell you, she said. Both of you. Mark's fork froze halfway to his mouth. What now? S.A. Ra didn't flinch at his tone. She'd inherited that from me, the ability to absorb a cold voice and keep going. I'm leaving Caldwell Logistics. Mark put his fork down with a clatter. You're what, S.A. Ra? That's the only stable firm in this city that's still hiring. You worked 3 years to get that position. You can't just throw it away because it's not stable anymore, Dad. That's the point. S.A. Ra opened the folder, and I could see the spreadsheets inside. The familiar are rows of numbers that I'd spent 20 years of my life reading and deciphering. They're restructuring. The senior partners are bringing in outside consultants, and they've already marked half the junior staff for replacement. I saw the list. S.A. Ra, if you're worried about layoffs, your father and I estiru, Mom. She cut me off, which she never did. It's not about the layoffs. It's not about money. I reached for her hand across the table, the way I'd reached for her when she was small and scraped her knee, when she'd come home crying from a fight with a friend, when she'd told me she didn't know what to do with her life. She pulled away. She'd been pulling away for months now, and I'd been telling myself it was just the pressure of her job, just the natural distance that happened when children grew up and became adults. But there was something else in her eyes tonight, something that looked like fear and anger all mixed together, and I'd seen that look before. I'd seen it in the mirror 15 years ago. It's not about money, she repeated, quieter now. I've been documenting discrepancies in the quarterly reports for 18 months. Someone's been funneling client payments into shell accounts. I brought it to my supervisor. I thought he'd take it seriously. He told me to drop it. He said I was misreading the numbers, that I didn't understand the accounting protocols. But I understand them just fine. I understand them well enough to know that $300,000 RS from the elderly CA refund is missing. Not misplaced. Not misreported. Missing. She pulled a single sheet from the folder and slid it across the table. I recognized the layout instantly. The columns, the notations, the CA refill accounting of funds that should have existed but didn't. I'd seen documents like this before. I'd held them in my own hands and wondered what to do with them. Last week, S.A. Ra continued. I found my name on the replacement list. I'm number 7 out of 12. They're going to fire me. They're going to fire me, and they're going to keep the money, and there's nothing I can do about it unless what Mark leaned four-way road. There was something in his voice that I hadn't heard in a long time. Something Shah RP and protective. Unless you go public with this S.A. Ra, you can't. You'll destroy your CA rear. Even if you're right, even if every single number in that folder is accurate, the firm will make you out to be the villain. They'll say you fabricated the evidence. They'll say you were trying to extort a promotion. They'll tell you APART. I've thought about all of that, S.A. Ra said. There were TRS in her eyes now, but she wasn't crying. Not yet. I've been thinking about it for 18 months. I've been going back and forth, telling myself to drop it, telling myself to find another job and walk away. But I can't walk away, Dad. There's an elderly CA refund in those reports. That's my grandmother's generation. That's your generation in Tenya RS. And if I don't do something, they're going to keep taking. They're going to keep taking, and no one will ever stop them. Mark stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hot road wood. He walked to the window, the way he always did when he was thinking, when he was trying to calculate the angles and figure out how to minimize the damage. I knew that posture as well as I knew my own reflection. I'd been my ride to him for 32 years, and I'd Leah Rened to read the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands curled into fists at his sides when he didn't like the options in front of him. S.A. Ra, he said, not turning around. I understand why you're upset. I understand that this is a moral issue, and I respect that you want to do the right thing. But there are practical considerations. Your mother's retirement, the mortgage, the fact that you're living in our house because you couldn't afford to live on your own. We're a family. We have to make decisions as a family. I am making decisions as a family, S.A. Ra said. That's why I'm telling you first. That's why I brought the folder. I need to know that when I do this, when everything goes wrong, I'll still have you. She looked at me then, and I saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen before. It wasn't accusation. It was something worse. It was recognition. She'd figured it out somehow, figured out that I knew more than I was saying, that I'd been saying my own manila folder for 15 years and had never found the courage to open it. I had to look away. I couldn't hold her gaze, couldn't let her see the truth that was written all over my face. The chicken sat on the table between us, cold and dry and completely forgotten. Somewhere in the next room, the clock ticked. My mother's clock, the one she'd given us when we got my ride, the one that I'd wound every Sunday for 32 years because it was the only thing of hers I'd kept, Mom. S.A. Ra's voice was soft now, too soft, the kind of soft that meant she was holding something back. Mom, there's something I need to ask you. Not now, Mark said, turning from the window. Your mother needs her rest. We'll talk about this tomorrow, when we've all had a chance to think clear. RLY. No, I said. The word came out before I could stop it. No, Mark. She needs to ask. She's been needing to ask for a long time. I looked at S.A. Ra, really looked at her, and I saw my own face reflected back at me in ways that made my stomach turn. The same cheekbones, the same way of frowning when we were concentrating, the same stubborn set to our jaws that had gotten us both into trouble more times than I could count. You know something? S.A. Ra said. It wasn't a question. You've known something for a long time, and you never told me. I didn't know, I said. Not for sure. I suspected. I had evidence, the same kind of evidence you have, but I didn't confirm it. I was too afraid. I was too afraid of what would happen to my family if I pushed. Mark sat back down heavily. His face was pale, the way it got when he'd been working too many hours, the way it got when he was trying to hold something together that was already coming apart. Ellen, don't do this. She has to know, I said. She has to know the whole story. Because if I don't tell her, she's going to walk into the same trap I did. She's going to think she can make a difference. And then she's going to find out that making a difference costs you everything. And she'll spend the rest of her life wondering if she should have done something different. I took a deep breath. The clock ticked. Marksta read at his hands, and Sa read at me, and I realized that I'd been running from this moment for 15 years. I'd been running, and I hadn't even known it. When I was 35, I said, the words coming out rough and raw. I was working at Trident Financial. I was in compliance. It was a good job, a secure job, the kind of job that was supposed to pay for my daughter's education and my husband's retirement and everything else we needed. And I found something. I found discrepancies in the pension accounts. Same pattern as what you're describing, Sa. Same shell companies. Same inflated vendor accounts. Same signature style on the approvals. Sa leaned four-way road. Who was it? Who was running it? I closed my eyes. The memory was so clear, so sharp. I could still see the office, the Gracier Repet, the plants that never seemed to get enough light. It was a junior accountant named Patterson. He was young, ambitious, the kind of person who smiled at you while he was figuring out how to use you. I took the evidence to my supervisor. He said he'd look into it. And then he called me back a week later and told me I was wrong. He told me I'd misread the numbers, that everything was Abaviboe Road. He offered me a promotion. He offered me an EARLY retirement package. And he told me, very kindly, that if I kept pushing, I would lose everything. Patterson, Sa breathed. Oh my God, he's the senior partner now. He's the one who told me to drop it. He's been building this the whole time, I said. I knew it. In the back of my mind, I knew it. I just didn't want to admit it, because admitting it would have meant admitting that I could have stopped him 15 years ago, that I could have protected those pension funds, that I could have made a difference, and I didn't, because I was too red of what it would cost me. Mark reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was tight, the way it got when he was trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. Ellen, that's not fair. You didn't know what would happen. You made the best decision you could with the information you had. I made the safe decision, I said. I made the easy decision, and I've regretted it every single day since. Sa's face was wet now. She wasn't crying the way she used to when she was little, with big heaving sobs that required a hug and a glass of water. She was crying the way adults did, quiet and contained, trying to hold it all in and not quite succeeding. Mom, she said, and her voice broke on the word. Mom, I need to know something. If I do this, if I go public with the evidence, will you stand with me? Even if it costs us everything. I looked at my daughter, and I saw the woman she'd become. The woman I'd helped to raise. The woman I'd taught to be careful and cautious and never to make waves. The woman who had somehow, despite everything I'd taught her, found the courage to do what I'd never been able to do. You're not going to do this alone, I said. You're not going to make the same mistakes I did. If you're going to fight this fight, we're going to fight it together. Mark squeezed my hand harder. Ellen, I've spent 15 years living with the consequences of my silence, I said. I'm not going to spend the next 15 years watching my daughter do the same thing. If Patterson wants a fight, he'll get one. But he's not going to get it from just Sa. He's going to get it from all of us. Sa let out a shaky breath. For the first time that night, something like relief flickered across her face. But it was quickly replaced by something else, something that looked like dread. There's something else I should tell you, she said. I've already spoken to a reporter at the City Chronicle. I called her before I came home tonight. She wants to run the story, but she says I need to go on record. She says I need to do it publicly, with my name attached. And she says I need to bring someone who can corroborate. She says I need someone with professional credibility, someone who was there. She looked at me, and I knew what she was asking. She was asking me to step forward, to admit the part I'd played, to become a witness instead of a ghost. I'll do it, I said. I'll go on record. Are you sure? Sa asked. Once I do this, everything changes. Dad's job, your retirement, the house dash. I've been running from this long enough, I said. It's time to stop running. Mark stood up again, and this time he walked around the table and put his arms around both of us. It was awkward, the way family embraces always were, but I leaned into it anyway. The clock ticked in the other room. The chicken sat untouched on the platter. And somewhere, in an office downtown, a man named Patterson was probably getting ready to go home to his own family, to his own comfortable life, never knowing that the woman who'd let him get away with it 15 years ago was finally going to speak. I didn't know what the next few months would bring. I didn't know if we'd lose the house, if Mark would lose his job, if Ra would ever work in accounting again. All I knew was that I couldn't stay silent. Not anymore. Not when my daughter was looking at me with eyes that said she'd seen what happens when people choose the easy path. If the City Chronicle office sat in a converted Wari house on the edge of downtown, the kind of building that tried to look like it had history, even though I remembered when it had been a mattress factory. The parking lot was full, so I ended up circling 3 times before I found a spot 2 blocks away. Ra was quiet beside me, her work bag clutched against her chest like a shield. She'd be spoken since we left the house that morning. Neither had I. I'd woken up at 4 again, same as every morning since Ra had put that folder on the table. The house had been to RK, and still, RK's breathing steady beside me, and I'd lain there ring at the ceiling and wondering if I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life or the only right decision I'd ever made. The clock ticked in the hallway, and I counted each second, trying to convince myself that I wasn't too old for this, that I wasn't too tired, that 15 years of silence didn't mean I'd lost the ability to speak. By the time we walked through the Chronicle's glass doors, my hands had stopped shaking. That was something. Anyway, the receptionist was young, maybe 25, with the kind of bright smile that said she hadn't been covering local news long enough to be jaded. She directed us to the 3rd floor, and the elevator ride was silent except for the creak of cables and Ra's shallow breathing. That Diana Chen's office was small and cluttered, the kind of space that belonged to someone who'd been doing this for years and had Leah Rened to make the most of limited resources. She was maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a blazer that I recognized immediately as the kind of expensive clothing you bought when you'd been ride for making people uncomfortable. She stood when we entered, extended a hand first to Ra, then to me. "I appreciate you coming in," she said, gesturing to the 2 chairs across from her desk. "I've been covering the business beat for 6 years. I've seen a lot of whistleblower cases come across my desk. Most of them don't go anywhere. The ones that do tend to be backed by people who understand what they're up against." "I understand," Ra said, settling into the chair and pulling her folder from her bag. "I've been documenting this for 18 months. I have bank statements, shell company registrations, a full paper trail. Patterson's been dash." Diana held up a hand. "I've reviewed your documents. They're solid. The shell accounts trace back to a holding company that Patterson's brother-in-law registered in Delaware. That's good. That's actionable. But your name isn't on the original complaint. That's a problem." Ra frowned. "I'm on the complaint. I filed it with the firm's ethics committee 3 months ago." Diana shook her head. "You filed a preliminary re-inquiry. Your name isn't on the formal complaint because you never submitted one. You were trying to protect yourself, which I understand. But that means Patterson has already preempted you. As of this morning, he's filed a complaint with the ethics committee alleging you falsified records to create a hostile work environment. He's claiming you fabricated the documents to retaliate against him for passing you over for a promotion." The room tilted. I gripped the armrests of my chair and forced myself to breathe. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of. The same trick, the same playbook, the same strategy that had worked 15 years ago. "He's bluffing," Ra said. But there was a tremor in her voice. "I have the original files. I have chain of custody. I can prove I accessed them through official channels." "Maybe. But bluffing has consequences. The ethics committee will launch an investigation that could take 6 months. During that time, you're suspended without pay, and your professional license is under review. Even if you're clear-read, the damage is done. No accounting firm will hire someone with a pending complaint. You'll be toxic, Ra. Professionally and personally." Diana said it matter-of-factly, without cruelty. She was telling Ra what she already knew, what we'd both known when we walked through the door. But hearing it spoken aloud was different. It made it real in a way that a manila folder full of spreadsheets couldn't. "Then we go public now," I said. Ra calls a press conference. She releases the documents, and Patterson has to answer to the public before the ethics committee can bury it. Diana turned to look at me. Her eyes narrowed, assessing. "You've been through something like this before. I've been through something similar. And I buried it because I was SCA red. I'm not SCA red anymore. You a re-SCA red, Diana said. You're terrified. I can see it in your face. But you're also angry, and that's useful. Tell me about the something similar. I looked at S.A. Ra. She nodded. B.A. rely perceptible. The same nod I'd given her a dozen times over the RS when she'd needed encouragement to speak her mind. I took a breath and STA route from the beginning. I worked at Trident Financial for 12 years. I was in compliance, senior enough to have access to the pension accounts, not senior enough to make decisions that mattered. 15 years ago, I found discrepancies in the same kind of pattern S.A. Ross describing. Shell companies, inflated vendor accounts, funds that seemed to vanish into thin air. I took the evidence to my supervisor, and he told me he'd look into it. He came back a week later and told me I was wrong. He offered me a promotion to keep quiet, and when I hesitated, he offered me an EARLY retirement package. I took it. I told myself I was protecting my family. I told myself that if I pushed, I'd lose everything. Did you? Diana asked. Lose everything? No. I gained a promotion and a pension and 15 years of guilt. I gained a daughter who grew up watching me avoid confrontation, who went into accounting because she wanted to be the one who caught things, who's now caught something and is about to be destroyed for it. Diana was writing in a notepad, quick efficient strokes. You said Patterson was the junior accountant. The one who drafted the memo instructing you to destroy your notes. I didn't tell you that before. I said he was involved. I didn't say he drafted the memo. You said it now? Is that accurate? I swallowed. The memory was RP and terrible, the way certain memories were. I could still see the memo's letterhead, still smell the coffee my boss had been drinking when he handed it to me. He drafted it. He was 30 years old, ambitious, and he knew exactly what he was doing. He's been building this network for 15 years, and he's been getting away with it because people like me were too afraid to stop him. Diana set down her pen. I need to be very clear, with both of you. If we run this story, Patterson will not go quietly. He'll hire lawyers who specialize in destroying reputations. He'll make S.A. Ross' personal life a public record. He'll call her competence into question, her ethics, even her sanity. He's done this before. He'll do it again. I know, S.A. Ross said. I'm ready. Are you ready to lose your job, your professional license, your friends? I've already lost those, S.A. Ross said. I lost them the day I saw the documents and realized Patterson was planning to replace me. I'm not afraid of losing anything else, because I've already lost the one thing that mattered. Diana studied her for a long moment. What's that? S.A. Rao was silent for a beat. Then, my belief that I could make a difference. I spent 3 years at Caldwell Logistics thinking I was building something, that I was contributing to something good. I was wrong. I was just another cog in a machine designed to rob people. And I can't live with that, Diana. I can't live with knowing and doing nothing. The office was quiet. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang, muffled by closed doors. I thought about my sister Rachel, about the pension fund that was supposed to take care of her and her husband. I thought about the clients whose money had been stolen, the elderly people who trusted Caldwell Logistics with their savings. I thought about all the years I'd spent telling myself that silence was a kind of protection. I'll testify, I said. Not just as S.A. Ross' mother. As a witness to the pattern. I'll go on record about what I saw at Trident. I'll give you names and dates and everything I remember. Diana looked at me. That changes things. It makes it a federal case, not just a local story. The SEC will have to investigate. I know. Your family will be in the spotlight. Your husband's job, your retirement, everything. I know. S.A. Ra reached for my hand under the desk. Her grip was cold and steady. Mom, are you sure? I'm sure, I said. I've been unsure my whole life. I'm done with that. Diana leaned back in her chair. The chair creaked under her weight. She was quiet for a long moment, processing everything we'd told her, calculating the angles the way good reporters always did. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. I have a daughter, she said. She's 8 years old. When I go home tonight, I'm going to tell her about the woman I met who finally had the courage to speak. I'm going to tell her that silence isn't loyalty. I'm going to tell her that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you were wrong. She reached across the desk and shook both our hands. I'll run the story, but I need you to understand. The moment it goes to print, there's no taking it back. Patterson will come after you with everything he has. And I can't protect you from that. No one can. S.A. Ra nodded. I understand. S.A. Ra, Diana said, and there was something almost motherly in her voice now. He'll call you every name in the book. He'll try to discredit you. He'll try to break you. You need to be ready for that. I've been ready for 18 months, S.A. Ra said. I just didn't know it. We left the Chronicle office at noon. The sun was high and bright, the kind of spring day that made you forget the world was full of people like Patterson. S.A. Ra was quiet in the car, her head resting against the window. I drove without thinking, my hands moving automatically through the familiar turns, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt something that might have been peace. Mom, S.A. Ra said as we pulled into the driveway. Do you remember when I was a little girl, and you'd tell me bedtime stories where the princess saved herself? I put the car in park and turned to look at her. Every night. I always thought that was you. You were the one who taught me to be brave. And then you stopped telling those stories, and I thought you changed. But I realize now you never changed. You just sta route telling yourself a different story. One where you couldn't win. Maybe, I said. Maybe I did. I'm not telling that story anymore, S.A. Ra said. Ariyu. I reached across the console and took her hand. Her fingers were cold but steady, the same hands that had held mine when she took her first steps, when she'd gotten her first job, when she'd walked into the office with the manila folder and changed everything. I'm not telling that story anymore, I said. I'm telling a different one now, one where I finally stopped running. The house was quiet when we walked in. Mark was at the dining table with his laptop open, his reading glasses perched on his nose. There were papers everywhere, spread across the table in the kind of organized chaos that meant he'd been working all morning. He looked up when we came in, and I saw the worry in his eyes, the same worry that had been there since S.A. Ra had first put the folder on the table. Labor Boa RD's interested, he said. He didn't ask how the meeting went. He didn't have to. He'd been making calls all morning, the way he always did when he was trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. My contact says there's precedent for this kind of thing, but they'll need a formal complaint filed within 72 hours. And they'll need a witness who can attest to the pattern. There's a witness, I said. Me. Mark looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't worry or calculation. It was pride. The same pride he'd had when I'd told him I was pregnant, when I'd come home with the promotion at Trident, when I'd quietly told him I was taking ERLY retirement because I needed to be home more. He'd never understood why I left. He'd asked once, back when the leaving was still fresh, and I'd told him I was tired, that I needed a break, that I wanted to be with S.A. Ra. He'd accepted it the way he accepted most things, with a nod and a silence that said he'd wait for the real answer whenever I was ready. I already told them, he said. I told them you were ready. You told them before you knew? I knew, he said. I knew 15 years ago that something happened. I didn't ask, because you didn't want to tell me. But I knew. S.A. Ra walked over to the table and looked at his spreadsheets. What are these, Dad? Notes, he said. I've been tracking Patterson's connections. His brother-in-law's construction company. The shell accounts. The pattern of acquisitions. It's not just accounting fraud, S.A. Ra. It's a full network. And I think I found the link. He showed her a page covered in handwritten arrows and names. It was messy and complicated, the kind of work that made sense only to the person who'd created it. But as I looked at it, I realized what he'd done. He'd connected the dots between Patterson's shell companies and a chain of senior living facilities that had been quietly acquired over the past decade. The same facilities whose pension funds S.A. Ra had been tracking. He's been stealing from the elderly, I said. Not just the pension funds. He's been involved in the acquisitions too. Mark nodded. If I'm right, he's been building this for 15 years. The accounting fraud was just the beginning. He's been using the funds to leverage buyouts, expand the network, consolidate power. S.A. Ra wasn't just uncovering a fraud. She was uncovering a whole system. S.A. Ra sank into a chair. I didn't know, she said. I thought it was just the pension accounts. I didn't realize how deep it went. It goes deep, Mark said. And that means when we go public, we're not just going up against Patterson. We're going up against everyone he's connected to. His partners, his investors, the people who've been profiting from this system for years. I sat down next to S.A. Ra and took her hand. Her fingers were still cold, but they weren't shaking anymore. She'd stopped shaking somewhere between the Chronicle office and our driveway, and I realized that she'd made her peace with whatever came next. We're not going up against them alone, I said. We have each other. And we have the truth. That has to count for something. Mark looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd married. The man who'd stood beside me at my mother's funeral, who'd held my hand when S.A. Ra was born, who'd worked double shifts for YRS so I could have the job I loved. He'd never been good with words, but he'd always been there. In his own quiet way, he'd been there. Counts for everything, he said. It counts for everything. The story ran on a Thursday. I knew it was coming because Diana called us the night before, her voice tight with the kind of controlled excitement that meant she'd just filed something she knew would make waves. She told us to expect calls, to be careful about what we said to strangers, to prep for the backlash. I thanked her and hung up and sat in the DRK kitchen for an hour, watching the streetlights flicker through the window, thinking about how strange it was that everything could change so quickly after so many years of nothing. The morning paper arrived at 7. Mark brought it in from the porch, his face unreadable, and laid it on the table without a word. The headline took up half the front page. Accounting firm accused of pension fund fraud. S.A. Ross' name was there, in black and white. My name was there too, buried in the middle of the article, but I knew it wouldn't stay buried for long. S.A. Ra came downstairs while I was still ring at the paper. She was wearing her bathrobe, her hair uncombed, and she looked younger somehow, like the teenager who used to come down for breakfast before school. She read the headline over my shoulder and said nothing. There was nothing to say. By noon, the local news channels had picked it up. By evening, my phone was ringing off the hook. I let most of the calls go to voicemail, but there were some I couldn't avoid. The first one was from my sister Rachel. She lived 2 states away, retired from teaching, the kind of person who called on birthdays and holidays and never had anything more urgent to discuss than the weather or her GA Redan. But this call was different. I could hear it in the way she said my name, clipped and Shah RP in a way I'd never heard before. Ellen, what have you done? I sat down on the kitchen stool, the cordless phone pressed to my EAR. Rachel, I need you to listen to me. I know this is a shock, but there's something you need to understand. The firm that S.A. Ra worked for has been stealing from pension funds. From people like us. I had to do something. You had to do something. Her voice was shaking. You had to involve your daughter. You had to drag our family into a fight you should have finished 15 years ago. I know. I know I should have handled it differently. But I couldn't let S.A. Ra make the same mistakes I made. I couldn't let her CARRY the same guilt. Guilt, Ellen. You think I don't know about guilt? You think I don't know what it's like to wake up every morning and wonder if you made the right choice? Rachel's voice cracked. I left my teaching job because I couldn't stand the administration. I walked away from a pension and a career because I thought I was doing the right thing. And I've spent the last 10 years wondering if I was just being selfish. So don't lecture me about guilt. I closed my eyes. I'd never thought of Rachel's decision that way. When she'd told me she was leaving teaching, I'd assumed it was about the stress, the long hours, the same reasons I'd left Trident. I'd never asked her if there was more to it. I'd never asked her if she was running from something too. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't mean to make this about you. I just wanted you to understand why I did it. I understand why you did it, Rachel said, quieter now. I understand because I've been where you are. I've been the person who saw something wrong and didn't know if she had the right to speak. But Ellen, my husband's pension is with Caldwell Logistics. If Patterson goes down, the fund could freeze assets for months. We can't afford that. I can't afford that. It won't freeze, I said. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The money is still there. Patterson's been siphoning it, but the principle is intact. If the investigation goes through, the funds will be returned. You won't lose anything. You don't know that. You can't guarantee that. I can't guarantee anything, I admitted. But I can promise you this. I'm doing this because I believe it's the right thing. Not because I want to hurt you. Not because I want to cause problems. Because I've been silent for 15 years, and silence hasn't helped anyone. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. I could hear her breathing on the other end, shallow and uneven. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost the voice I remembered from childhood, the voice she used when she was SCA red and trying to hide it. I'm SCA red, Ellen. I know you are too. But I also know you've been CA-rying this guilt for a long time. I'm your sister. I can't tell you it's going to be okay, but I can tell you I'll be there. Whatever happens. The words took the weight off my chest. Thank you. But you need to tell me everything, she said. The complete story. Because if Patterson's lawyers come to my door, I need to know what they're going to ask. For the next hour, I walked Rachel through the timeline. I told her about the initial discrepancies I'd found at Trident, the promotion I'd accepted, the way Patterson had orchestrated the cover-up. I told her about the pension fund collapse that never got investigated, the victims who never received compensation, the guilt I'd never been able to shake. I told her everything I'd been holding inside for 15 years, and when I finally stopped talking, I felt lighter than I had in decades. I have to go, Rachel said finally. I have to talk to my husband. But Ellen, I'm proud of you. I know I didn't say that before, but I'm proud of you. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there for a long moment, the phone still pressed to my EAR, the dial tone humming in the silence. Then I put the phone down and walked into the living room, where S.A. Ra was sitting on the couch with her laptop. That was Aunt Rachel, I said as S.A. Ra looked up. How did she take it? Better than I expected. She's S.C.A. read. But she's not angry. She will be, S.A. Ra said. Everyone's going to be angry at us. That's what happens when you tell the truth. People get angry because the truth makes them uncomfortable. Is that how you feel? I asked. Uncomfortable. I feel like I've been holding my breath for 18 months, S.A. Ra said. And now I'm finally breathing. That's how I feel. She was right. It was the same way I felt, like I'd been underwater and had finally surfaced. But I knew it wouldn't last. The anger was coming, the backlash, the lawyers and the accusations, and the slow grind of the investigation. We were in the middle of a storm, and the storm was only getting STA root. The second call came that evening. It was from Mark's cousin, a man named David who worked in insurance and had never approved of my decision to leave Trident. He spoke in clipped, formal sentences, the kind of language he used when he was trying to sound professional, but was actually furious. Ellen, I need to know if the accusations against Caldwell Logistics are going to affect my client portfolio. I'm invested in the same pension funds, and I can't afford to lose that capital. I can't give you financial advice, I said. All I can tell you is what I know. What you know, David repeated, and there was a sneer in his voice now. You know what you think you saw 15 years ago. You know what you think your daughter saw. But you don't know anything for sure, do you? You're just guessing. You're risking everything on a guess. I'm risking everything on the truth, I said. That's not a guess. The line went dead. ISTA read at the phone in my hand and felt the same old sinking feeling, the same sick certainty that I'd made a terrible mistake. But then I looked at S.A. Ra, at the set of her shoulders, the way she was leaning forward over her laptop, still fighting, still refusing to give up, and I remembered why I'd STA root this in the first place. I wasn't doing it for David or Rachel or anyone else. I was doing it for S.A. Ra, and I was doing it for the woman I used to be, the woman who'd found the evidence and been too afraid to use it. S.A. Ra's phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. Who is it? I asked. She held up the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. You should have taken the settlement. Now I will destroy you. Patterson, S.A. Ra said. Or one of his people. Block the number. Don't respond. I know what to do, Mom. I'm not a child. I held up my hands. I know. I'm not trying to treat you like one. I'm just worried. Everyone's worried. That's what happens when you speak out. She blocked the number and set the phone down. But I can't live my life being worried. I've been worried for 18 months, and it hasn't done me any good. Mark came in from the kitchen, ryeing 3 cups of tea. He set them down on the coffee table and sat next to S.A. Ra. I just got a call from my supervisor, he said. The plant wants to know if I'm involved in this. Are you? S.A. Ra asked. I'm involved in supporting my family. That's not the same as being involved in the investigation. He took a sip of his tea. But I told him that if they want to fire me for standing by my daughter, they can go ahead. S.A. Ra STA read at him. Dad, you can't lose your job for me. I'm not losing my job for you. I'm losing my job because I refuse to work for people who think a man should be ashamed of his own family. The words hung in the air. Mark had never said anything like that before. He'd always been reeful, practical, the kind of man who planned for every contingency. But something had changed in him. Maybe it was the same thing that had changed in me. Maybe we'd both finally realized that playing it safe wasn't safe at all. Thank you, S.A. Ra said softly. Both of you. I know I haven't said it enough. But thank you. You don't have to thank us, I said. You're our daughter. That's what we do. We sat in the living room, the 3 of us, drinking tea and not saying much. The evening news came on, And there was our story again. The accusations, the investigation, the names of Patterson and S.A. Ra and Caldwell Logistics. I watched it like it was happening to someone else, like I was just a spectator in my own life. Then the phone rang again. This time it was the SEC investigator, a woman named Villegas. She spoke in the same clipped, professional tone as David, but there was something else underneath it, something that sounded almost like approval. Ms. Hart, I've reviewed the documents your daughter submitted. I need to speak with you both. Can you come to the federal building tomorrow morning? Of course, I said. What time? 9 o'clock. Bring everything you have. And be prepared for a long conversation. The call ended. I turned to S.A. Ra and Mark. The SEC wants to meet tomorrow. They're taking this seriously. Of course they agree, Mark said. That's what happens when you have evidence. S.A. Ra was already gathering her documents, organizing them into neat stacks. She'd been doing that for months now, sorting and resorting, making sure everything was in order. It was the only way she knew to cope with the chaos. I watched her and thought about my mother. She died 5 years after I left Trident, never knowing what I'd done or hadn't done. I told myself it was kinder not to burden her, that she'd had enough worries in her life without adding my mistakes to the list. But now I wondered if I'd been wrong. Maybe she'd have wanted to know. Maybe she'd have been proud of me for finally speaking up. That the night wore on. We ate dinner in silence, the same dry chicken and potatoes I'd been making for 30 years, and I wondered if my mother's clock would still be ticking when all of this was over. I'd wound it every Sunday for 3 decades, and I'd keep winding it for 3 decades more if I had to. But I also knew that some things couldn't be wound back. Some choices couldn't be undone. And maybe that was okay. Maybe the point wasn't to undo the past. The point was to finally live honestly in the present. S.A. Ra went to bed early, exhausted by the weight of the day. Mark stayed up with me, helping me sort through old boxes of papers I'd never thrown away. We found the file from Trident, the one I'd kept hidden for 15 years, and I opened it for the first time since I'd left. Are you okay? Mark asked. I will be, I said. I just need to see it one more time. I read through the notes, the memos, the evidence I'd compiled so long ago. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt angry. I felt the same anger S.A. Ra must have felt when she found her documents. The same anger that came from seeing something wrong and knowing you could have stopped it. I should have done something, I said. 15 years ago, I should have fought. You did what you could, Mark said. You made the decision that made sense at the time. But it wasn't the right decision. No, he admitted. Maybe it wasn't. But you're making the right decision now. That's what counts. I closed the file and set it aside. The clock ticked in the hallway, steady and patient, measuring the time we'd lost and the time we had left. And I realized that I didn't need to be the person I was 15 years ago. I needed to be the person I was now. The person who was finally ready to fight. The hearing was scheduled for 10 in the morning, but we arrived at the Labor Boa RD office at 8:30. I'd always been early for things, a habit I'd learned from my mother, who believed that being late was a sign of disrespect. S.A. Ra was the same way, and Mark too. So we sat in the parking lot for an hour, sipping coffee from a thermos I'd brought and watching the others say RSA arrive. The building was plain, the kind of government office that looked the same whether you were in this city or any other. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, the faint smell of disinfectant and old CA repet. Marga Ret, the mediator, met us in the lobby. She was about my age, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and the calm, measured voice of someone who'd spent decades dealing with disputes. Ms. Hart. Ms. Hart, she said, shaking our hands. Thank you for coming. We'll be in conference room B. Mr. Patterson and his counsel are already here. I felt a lurch in my stomach. I hadn't expected them to be early. I'd hoped for a few minutes to collect myself, to practice what I wanted to say. But there was no time for that now. S.A. Ross squeezed my hand, and we followed Marga Ret down the corridor. Conference room B was small, with a long table and metal chairs that looked like they'd been purchased from a school surplus sale. Patterson was sitting on the FAR side, flanked by his lawyer, a thin man in an expensive suit who didn't look up when we entered. Patterson himself was older than I remembered, softer around the edges, but his eyes were the same. Sharp and calculating and completely without remorse. Ms. Hart, he said, nodding at S.A. Ra. I'm sorry it's come to this. I always thought you were a promising accountant. S.A. Ra didn't respond. She sat down stiffly, her folder clutched against her chest like a shield. I sat next to her, and Mark sat behind us, his presence steady and reassuring. Arjaret took her place at the head of the table. The purpose of this hearing is to determine whether a formal investigation is warranted. Both parties will present evidence. Ms. Hart, you have the floor. S.A. Ra stood. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was steady. Thank you. I'm here to present evidence of financial misconduct within Caldwell Logistics. Over the past 18 months, I identified a pattern of fund diversion from a client pension account into shell companies controlled by the firm's senior partners. My documentation includes bank statements, chain of custody records, and copies of the shell company registrations. Patterson's lawyer interrupted before S.A. Ra could continue. Objection. Ms. Hart's documentation was obtained in violation of company policy. She lacks standing to present it. Margaret held up a hand. We'll address chain of custody in a moment. Continue, Ms. Hart. S.A. Ra presented her evidence methodically, the way she'd practiced. She walked through the spreadsheets, explained the irregularities in the vendor accounts, showed how the funds had been routed through a series of holding companies that all traced back to Patterson's brother-in-law. It was refill work, the kind of work that took months to compile, and I felt a surge of pride as I watched her. Patterson listened with an expression of mild boredom, like he was watching a presentation he'd seen 100 times before. When S.A. Ra finished, he leaned forward and spoke for the first time. Ms. Hart was a valuable employee, he said. We offered her training, mentorship, a clear our path to promotion. She responded by stealing confidential documents and fabricating accusations. The documents she's presenting are irrelevant. They're tied to a contract that our firm terminated 3 months ago. That's not true, S.A. Ra said. The contract is still active. The client is still paying into the fund. Patterson smiled. It was the same smile I remembered from 15 years ago, the smile that said he knew something you didn't. The client is an elderly CA facility that hasn't made a payment in 6 months. The fund you're talking about is inactive. I have documentation to prove it. He pulled out a file, thick and official looking, and handed it to Margaret. She flipped through it slowly, her expression unreadable. When she looked up, she said, "The account is frozen pending a review." That's not the same as inactive. It's frozen because we identified a potential irregularity, Patterson said smoothly. We launched an internal audit 3 months ago. Ms. Hart's accusations are a direct consequence of that audit. She's trying to preempt a finding against her. I felt the familiar twist in my stomach. This was what he did. He created a parallel narrative, one where he was the good guy and S.A. Ra was the problem. It was the same trick he'd used at Trident, the same strategy that had buried the truth for 15 years. May I speak? I asked them. Margaret nodded. Go ahead. I stood, my legs shaky but my voice firm. 15 years ago, I worked at Trident Financial. I identified a similar pattern of fund diversion from a pension account into shell companies. I was told to keep quiet. I was given a promotion and an EARLY retirement package. Now I see the same pattern, the same names, the same shell companies. Mr. Patterson was a junior accountant on that case. He orchestrated the cover-up then. He's orchestrating it now. Patterson's face remained impassive, but I saw a flicker in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to speak. He'd probably hoped I'd stay in the background, silent and ashamed, the way I'd been 15 years ago. Your memory is mistaken, Patterson said. I was not involved in the Trident case. I was a junior auditor with no oversight authority. You were the lead auditor's assistant, I said. You saw the same documents I saw. And when I was told to drop the case, you were the one who drafted the memo instructing me to destroy my notes. The room went silent. I'd never said that out loud before. I'd never admitted to anyone that I knew Patterson was the architect of the cover-up. But now the words were out, and I couldn't take them back. That Patterson's lawyer whispered something to him. Patterson's face tightened almost imperceptibly. Then he smiled again, the same cold smile he'd given S.A. Ra liard. The mediator will determine whether there's sufficient evidence to proceed, his lawyer said. But I want to note that Ms. Hart's testimony is based on events that occurred 15 years ago. Memory is unreliable. She has no documentation to support her claims. I have documentation, S.A. Ross said. I found the original Trident files in the firm's archive. They were misfiled, but they exist. I have copies. Patterson's lawyer stood abruptly. This is a violation of attorney-client privilege. Those files were sealed. They weren't sealed, S.A. Ross said. They were misfiled in a cabinet that should have been empty. The archivist signed off on my access. I have the chain of custody records. Marga Rhett held up a hand. Let me see the copies. S.A. Ra pulled a second folder from her bag and handed it over. Marga Rhett flipped through it, her eyebrows rising slightly. When she finished, she set the folder down and looked at Patterson. Mr. Patterson, these documents suggest a pattern of misconduct that predates your tenure at Caldwell Logistics. Do you have any response? Patterson's lawyer stood again. We request a recess. This evidence was not presented in advance, and we need time to review it. Denied, Marga Rhett said. The purpose of this hearing is to determine whether to proceed with an investigation. Ms. Hart has provided sufficient evidence to justify that. I recommend a formal inquiry. Patterson's face finally cracked. For a split second, I saw the anger underneath, the rage that came from being outmaneuvered. Then it was gone, replaced by the same bland smile he'd worn all morning. We'll appeal this decision, his lawyer said. Mr. Patterson has been a respected member of the accounting community for 20 years. These accusations will not stand. We'll be ready, S.A. Ross said. We'll be ready for whatever you throw at us. The hearing ended. Marga Rhett gathered her notes and left the room. Patterson and his lawyer followed, not looking back. S.A. Ross sank into her chair, her face pale, and I could see the tension draining out of her shoulders. Mom, I can't believe you said that, she whispered. About the memo. I didn't know you knew about the memo. I didn't know I knew either, I admitted. It just came out. I guess I've been holding on to it for so long it had to come out eventually. Mark came over and put his hands on both our shoulders. You were brilliant. Both of you. They didn't know what hit them. They didn't know what hit them. That was true. But I also knew that Patterson wasn't done. He'd appeal. He'd delay. He'd do everything in his power to make this go away. We'd won the first battle, but the war was just beginning that we drove home in silence. The sun was high and bright, the kind of day that made you forget the world was full of people like Patterson. S.A. Ra leaned her head against the window, her eyes closed. Mark read out at the road, his hands steady on the wheel. And I sat in the back seat, watching them both, thinking about how strange it was to have everything change so quickly. When we got home, there was a message on the answering machine. It was from a woman I didn't recognize, her voice tight with anger. I hope you're happy, Ms. Hart. You've ruined my husband's reputation. He worked for Caldwell Logistics for 30 years, and now he's being investigated because of your daughter's lies. I hope you can live with that. I deleted the message. Then I sat down in the kitchen and STA read at the wall. Mom, S.A. Ross said softly. Are you okay? I will be, I said. I just need a minute. She sat down across from me. We knew this was going to happen. We knew people would be angry. I know. I just didn't expect it to feel this way. Feel what way? I thought about it for a moment. Like I'm standing in the middle of a storm, and I can't see where it's going to end. S.A. Ra reached across the table and took my hand. That's how I felt for 18 months. Every single day. But it does end. Eventually, the storm passes. I squeezed her hand. How do you know? Because I've seen the other side, she said. I've seen what happens when you give up. I've seen what happens when you stay silent. And I know that even if this storm never ends, it's better than being trapped in the silence. She was right. She was so much wiser than I'd been at her age, so much braver. And I realized that I'd been wrong about her all along. I'd thought she was fragile, that she needed to be protected. But she'd never needed protection. She'd needed someone to stand beside her while she fought her own battles. That night, I wound my mother's clock. The mechanism was smooth and familiar, the same motion I'd done every Sunday for 32 years. Mark came up behind me and put his arms around my waist. You did good today, he said. You did what you should have done 15 years ago. I know, I said, but it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like the beginning of something. It is, he said. That's what makes it worth doing. I leaned into him and listened to the clock tick. Somewhere across the city, Patterson was probably planning his next move, calculating the angles, figuring out how to salvage his reputation. He didn't know it yet, but the fight was just beginning. And I was ready. For the first time in 15 years, I was truly ready. The investigation took 4 weeks. 4 weeks of waiting, of phone calls that went unanswered, of late-night conversations where we rehashed the same evidence and asked the same questions. For weeks of watching S.A. Ra grow thinner and quieter, of watching Mark retreat into his work, of watching our house slowly fill with a tension that none of us knew how to break. I spent most of those weeks in the kitchen. It had always been my refuge, the place where I could focus on something concrete, something that didn't require me to think about Patterson or the SEC or the endless waiting. I baked bread, I made casseroles, I scrubbed the counters until they gleamed. It was the only way I knew to keep my hands busy while my mind raced in circles. The calls kept coming. Some were supportive, old friends and former colleagues who'd read about the case and wanted to offer encouragement. Others were angry, strangers who'd somehow found our number and wanted to tell me exactly what they thought of S.A. Ross' accusations. I stopped answering the phone after the second week. Mark handled most of them, his voice calm and measured, the same voice he used when he was trying to defuse a tense situation at the plant one evening. About 3 weeks into the investigation, S.A. Ra came downstairs with her laptop open. She'd been spending most of her time in her room, working on something she wouldn't talk about, and I'd Rened not to push. But tonight, there was something different in her face, a kind of resolve I hadn't seen since the he-ring. "Mom," she said, settling onto the couch next to me. "I need to tell you something. About Emily." I put down my knitting. "Your coworker, the one who reached out to you." She reached out again. "She's been sending me messages for weeks, and I've been ignoring them because I didn't trust her. She was always Patterson's ally. She worked on the same contracts. She knew what was happening, and she didn't say anything. Then why are you talking to her now?" S.A. Ra was quiet for a moment. She scrolled through something on her screen, her expression unreadable. "Because she sent me this." She turned the laptop so I could see. It was a document, the same kind of spreadsheet I'd seen 100 times before. But there was something different about this one. It had Emily's initials in the corner, and a date that was only 2 weeks old. "She's been compiling her own evidence," S.A. Ra said. "She's been watching Patterson for years. She knew about the shell accounts, the diverted funds, everything. She just didn't know how to stop him. And then I came along, and she saw an opportunity. She wants to help. She wants to testify," S.A. Ra said. "She's willing to go on record. She has documents that we don't have, vendor contracts, internal memos, emails that show Patterson knew exactly what he was doing." I read through the document slowly. It was damning, the kind of evidence that would seal Patterson's fate if it ever saw the light of day. But I also saw the risk. Emily was a current employee. If she testified, she'd lose her job, her reputation, everything she'd built. "Is she sure about this?" I asked. "She's sure. She's been CA-rying the same guilt I was CA-rying. The same guilt you were CA-rying. She wants to get it off her chest." I looked at S.A. Ra, and I saw the same mixture of hope and fear that had been in her eyes since the beginning. She'd been fighting this fight alone for so long, and now she had an ally. Someone who understood what she was going through. Someone who'd seen the same things she'd seen. "Have you told your father?" I asked. "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first." "Why me?" S.A. Ra closed the laptop. "Because you understand. You know what it's like to CA-RRY a secret for years. You know what it's like to finally let it go." I reached over and took her hand. "I do. And I know how hard it is. But I also know that you're doing the right thing. Both of you." S.A. Ra nodded, and I saw the tension in her shoulders release slightly. She'd been CA-rying so much for so long, and she'd been CA-rying it alone. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had Emily. She had Mark. She had me. And together, we were going to make sure Patterson never hurt anyone again. The next few days were a blur of activity. S.A. Ra met with Emily, went over her documents. Prepper read her testimony. Mark made phone calls to his contacts at the Labor Board, making sure the new evidence would be included in the investigation. I stayed in the kitchen, cooking and cleaning, and trying to keep my anxiety from spilling over into my family. Then, on a Thursday morning, we got the call. The SEC had completed its preliminary re-investigation, and was moving four-way RD with a formal inquiry. Patterson would be subpoenaed, his records reviewed, his associates interviewed. It was exactly what we'd been hoping for, but it was also the beginning of something else. Something that would test us in ways we hadn't anticipated. The first sign came that evening. Mark came home from work with a letter in his hand, his face pale. He sat down at the table without speaking and slid the letter across to me. I read it twice, not quite believing what I was seeing. The plant had been acquired by a La Ridger corporation, one with ties to Caldwell Logistics. Mark's position was being eliminated, effective immediately. He had 2 weeks to vacate his office and return his equipment. They know, S.A. Ra said. Patterson's people bought the plant to get to you. Mark shook his head. It's not about Patterson. It's just business. The acquisition was planned months ago. Don't be naive, Dad. You've worked there for 22 years. They don't eliminate positions without warning. They did this because of us. Mark's route to protest, but I cut him off. She's right. This is retaliation. Patterson is sending a message. Mark slumped back in his chair. What kind of message? The kind that says we're not safe, I said. Not our jobs, not our savings, not anything. He's trying to break us. The next day, I got my own message. A certified letter from my former employer, informing me that my pension was under review due to irregularities in my employment records. The same records that had been perfectly fine for 15 years. Coincidence, Mark said when I showed him the letter. Coincidence doesn't work this way, I said. This is Patterson. He's using his connections to destroy us. S.A. Ra was in the kitchen. STA ring at the 2 letters spread out on the table. Her face was white, but her hands were steady. What do we do now? We fight, I said. We keep fighting. We don't give him the satisfaction of seeing US break. But if we lose the house, if we lose everything then we start over, Mark said. We've done it before. We can do it again. I looked at him, and I saw the same resolve that had been in S.A. Ra's eyes since the beginning. He'd never been one for grand speeches or dramatic gestures, but he'd always been steady. He'd always been there. And now, when everything was falling apart, he was still there. We're not going to lose the house, I said. We're not going to lose anything. Because Patterson is going to lose everything. That's how this ends. Emily's testimony was scheduled for the following week. She'd been nervous, S.A. Ra told me, but she was ready. She'd compiled everything she had, cross-referenced it with our evidence, made sure there were no gaps. She was going to put Patterson away for good. But the day before her testimony, Emily called S.A. Ra. Her voice was shaking, B.A. rely above a whisper. I can't do it. I can't go through with it. Emily, what happened? S.A. Ra asked. Patterson's lawyer called me. He said if I testify, they'll sue me for defamation. They'll take everything I have. They'll destroy my CA rear. They're bluffing, S.A. Ra said. They can't touch you if you have evidence. I don't have enough evidence, Emily said. I thought I did, but I don't. I only have part of the picture. If I testify, they'll TR me apart. I can't do that. I have kids. I have a mortgage. I can't risk everything. S.A. Ra tried to reason with her, but Emily had already made up her mind. She was out. She wasn't going to help us, and she wasn't going to let us use her name. She's SCA red, S.A. Ra said when she got off the phone. She's too SCA red to fight. Then we fight without her, I said. We've done it before. We can do it again. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Emily's testimony would have been crucial. Without it, our case was weaker. Patterson would have room to maneuver, to cast doubt on the evidence. We weren't beaten, but we were wounded. Mark came home late that night. He'd been out looking for work, hitting the same dead ends he'd been hitting for weeks. No one's hiring, he said. Not in my field. I might have to take something part time. Something temporary. We'll manage, I said. We always manage. But I wasn't sure anymore. The weight of everything was pressing down on us, and I could feel it in my bones. The sleepless nights, the endless waiting, the slow erosion of everything we'd built. Patterson wasn't just trying to beat us. He was trying to grind us down. S.A. Ra was in her room, going over the evidence again. I could hear her through the door, the soft rustle of papers, the occasional murmur of frustration. She'd been working nonstop since Emily backed out, trying to find a way to salvage the case that I knocked on the door. S.A. Ra, can I come in? Sure, Mom. She was sitting on her bed, surrounded by papers. Her laptop was open, the screen glowing faintly in the dim light. She looked tired, older than she had any right to be. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Something I've been keeping from you." "What is it?" "I've been looking into Patterson's personal accounts. Not just the corporate ones. His personal ones." "How did you get access to those?" Sarah hesitated. "I might have used a contact who knows how to bypass certain security measures. It's not exactly legal." "I know," she said. "I know it's wrong, but I needed to know the truth. And I found it. Patterson's been using the diverted funds to buy properties. Houses, condos, vacation homes. He's been living on the money he stole from those pension funds." I sat down next to her. "Show me." She pulled up a series of documents on her laptop. Bank statements, property records, transaction histories. It was all there, laid out in black and white. Patterson had been stealing for years, building a portfolio of assets that would make most people's heads spin. "This is what we needed," Sarah said. "This is what makes the case rock solid. But it's not admissible. You obtained it illegally." "I know, but I don't see anymore. Patterson's been getting away with this for so long, and I don't see how we stop him. I just want it to stop." I looked at my daughter, and I saw the exhaustion and the desperation in her eyes. She'd been fighting so hard for so long, and she was running out of steam. "Listen to me," I said. "You're not going to do anything illegal. We're going to find another way. We're going to do this the right way, because if we don't, Patterson will use it against us. He'll say we're just as bad as he is." "But Mom, no buts. We're going to do this together, and we're going to win. But we're going to win the right way." Sarah read at me for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay, Mom. Okay." I pulled her into a hug, the first one I'd given her in what felt like weeks. She was stiff in my arms at first, then she relaxed, and I felt her tears soaking into my shoulder. "We're going to be okay," I said. "We're going to be okay." I didn't know if it was true, but I said it anyway. Because that's what mothers did. They said things would be okay, even when they weren't sure, even when everything was falling apart. They held on, and they kept holding on, because that was the only thing they knew how to do. The clock ticked in the hallway, steady and patient, marking the time we'd lost and the time we had left. And I held my daughter and listened to it, and I hoped, more than I'd ever hoped for anything, that we would come through this together. We had to. We had no other choice. The letter came on a Tuesday, slipped through the mail slot like any other piece of correspondence. I almost tossed it aside with the bills and the circular RS, but something about the return address caught my eye. The name was familiar in a way that made my stomach drop. Gerald Morrison, my old boss at Trident Financial. I stood in the hallway, the envelope in my hand, and I couldn't bring myself to open it. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Weighted with 15 years of history, I tried so hard to bury. Sarah was in the kitchen, making coffee, and Mark was at the table with his laptop, still searching for work. Neither of them noticed me standing there, frozen in the dim light of the entrance. "Mom," Sarah called. "Coffee's ready." I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket. "Coming." I sat through breakfast with my hands wrapped around my mug, feeling the crinkle of paper against my thigh. Mark was talking about a lead he'd gotten from an old colleague, something about a warehouse supervisor position that might be opening up. Sarah was going over the evidence again, rechecking the numbers, looking for anything she might have missed. I nodded and made the right sounds, but my mind was elsewhere. After breakfast, I retreated to my bedroom and closed the door. The letter sat on my nightstand, taunting me. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands, and finally opened it. The stationery was expensive, the kind of heavy cream paper that people used when they wanted to make an impression. Gerald's handwriting was the same as I remembered, neat and precise, the handwriting of a man who'd spent decades signing off on documents he hadn't read. Briefly enough, Ellen. The letter began. "I have been following the news about your daughter's case with great concern. I realize that we have not spoken in many years, but I feel compelled to reach out now. There are things I should have said to you long ago, things I should have done differently. I hope you will give me the chance to say them now." I read the letter twice, then 3 times. Gerald was offering to meet. He was offering to tell me what he knew about Patterson's activities, about the network of people who'd been protecting him for years. He was offering to help but I didn't trust it. Gerald had been part of the cover-up. He'd been the one who'd told me to keep quiet, who'd offered me the promotion, who'd made it clear, or that my CA rear depended on my silence. Why would he change now? I showed the letter to S.A. Ra that afternoon. She read it slowly, her expression shifting from curiosity to suspicion. He's trying to protect himself, she said. He knows Patterson is going down, and he wants to get ahead of it. Maybe. Or maybe he really wants to help. Mom, he was RT of the system. He let Patterson get away with it for YRS. Why would he suddenly grow a conscience? I thought about that. I thought about all the YRS I'd spent CA-ing the guilt of my own silence. All the nights I'd lain awake wondering if I should have done something different. Gerald had been CA-ing that guilt too. Maybe he'd finally reached the same breaking point I had. I'm going to meet him, I said. Not for the case. For myself. S.A. Ra STA route to protest, but MARK cut her off. Let her go. She needs this. S.A. Ra looked at him, then at me. She didn't look happy, but she nodded. Okay, Mom. But I'm coming with you. No. This is something I have to do alone. The meeting was set for a Thursday afternoon at a coffee shop NEA or the waterfront. I arrived EARLY, found a table by the window, and watched the boats drift slowly across the harbor. The place was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt almost sacred after the noise of the past few months. Gerald walked in at exactly 3 o'clock. He was older than I remembered, grayer, his shoulders stooped in a way that made him look diminished. He'd been a commanding presence once, the kind of man who filled a room just by walking into it. Now he seemed smaller, like the weight of his decisions had finally caught up with him. Ellen, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. Thank you for coming. I know I don't deserve your time. I didn't say anything. I waited. I've been following the case, he continued. Your daughter is very brave. Braver than I was. Braver than you were. Is that supposed to make me feel better? He shook his head. No. It's supposed to make me feel worse. Because I should have been the one to stop Patterson. I should have been the one to speak up. But I didn't. I was too afraid of what it would cost me. The waitress came and took our orders. Gerald ordered tea he didn't drink. I ordered coffee I didn't touch. When the waitress left, Gerald pulled out a folder from his briefcase. It was thick, the kind of folder that meant business to. I kept these, he said. I told you I destroyed them. I didn't. I was never brave enough to throw them away. And now I think I was waiting for someone like your daughter to come along. Someone who wasn't afraid. He slid the folder across the table. I opened it slowly, and I saw the documents I'd thought were gone forever. The memos, the spreadsheets, the internal emails that traced Patterson's activities back to the very beginning. It was all there, everything I'd compiled 15 years ago, and more to. Why now? I asked. Gerald looked down at his hands. Because I'm running out of time. My doctor told me 6 months. Cancer. I don't have much left, and I want to leave something behind that I can be proud of. ISTA read at him. The anger I'd been CA-ing for 15 years slowly faded, replaced by something like pity. He'd been RT of the cover-up, yes. But he'd also been RT of the system, a system that had been designed to protect people like Patterson and punish people like me. He'd made terrible choices, but he'd made them because he'd been afraid. Will you testify? I asked. Will you say all of this on the record? Gerald nodded. I'll say whatever you need me to say. I'll tell them everything. I closed the folder and held it against my chest. Thank you. No, Ellen. Thank you. For giving me the chance to make things right. We didn't say much after that. Gerald finished his tea, paid the bill, and stood to leave. At the door, he turned back and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Your daughter, he said. She's going to change the world. I hope you know that. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat beside me. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the road. I thought about Gerald, about the choices he'd made and the ones he was making now. I thought about the time I'd wasted, the years I'd spent hiding from the truth. And I realized that it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what we did with the time we had left. S.A. Ra and MARK were waiting when I got home. I put the folder on the table and told them everything. S.A. Ra opened it slowly, flipping through the documents with the same CA-full attention she'd given her own evidence. Mom, she said, her voice rely above a whisper. This is everything. This is the whole picture. I know. We can use this. It's admissible, it's documented, it's solid. We can finally put Patterson away. I sat down next to her. That's the plan. MARK came over and put his hands on both our shoulders. You did it, Ellen. You finally did it. Not yet, I said. Not until he's in handcuffs. But I felt it, deep in my chest, the same feeling I'd had the night S.A. Ra first put her folder on the table. The feeling of something ending and something beginning. The feeling of finally, after all these years, being ready to face whatever came next. The next few days were a whirlwind. S.A. Ra and I worked together to integrate Gerald's documents with our existing evidence, cross-referencing dates and names, building a narrative that would be impossible to refute. Mark made calls to his contacts at the Labor Boa RD, CU, coordinating the next steps. We were a team, finally, working Tawa RD a common goal. Then, on a Monday morning, we got the news. Patterson had been arrested. The SEC had issued a warrant, and the FBI had picked him up at his home, in front of his wife and children. He was being charged with fraud, embezzlement, and a host of other crimes that would keep him in prison for a very long time. Sarah Este read at the television screen, her face unreadable. "It's over," she said. "It's finally over." "It's not over," I said. "Not yet. There's still the trial. There's still the fallout. But the worst part is behind us." She turned to look at me, and I saw the TRS in her eyes. "Mom, I couldn't have done this without you." "You could have," I said. "You're stronger than you think." "I know," she said. "But I'm glad I didn't have to." We hugged in the middle of the living room, the news still playing in the background. Mark came and joined us, and for a moment, we just stood there, holding each other in the quiet of the house. The clock ticked in the hallway. My mother's clock, the one she'd given us when we got married, the one I'd wound every Sunday for 32 years. It was still ticking, still measuring the time we'd spent and the time we had left. And I realized that it didn't matter how much time we'd lost. What mattered was how we used the time we had. We'd made mistakes, all of us. But we'd also made choices. And the choices we made now were what would define us. Patterson was in custody. The investigation was moving four-way road. And we were still standing, still fighting, still together. That was all that mattered. The trial lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of sitting in the same hot RD wooden bench, watching S.A. Ra testify with a steadiness I still couldn't quite believe. 3 weeks of listening to Gerald Morrison's voice crack as he admitted his role in the cover-up, of watching Patterson's face shift from confidence to something that looked almost like fear. 3 weeks of holding Mark's hand so tightly, I left bruises we didn't notice until after. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. We spent those hours in a small room off the courthouse hallway, drinking bad coffee and not saying much. S.A. Ra paced the length of the room so many times I lost count. Mark Sta read out the window, his jaw tight. I sat in the corner and listened to the clock tick, the same steady rhythm I'd been listening to my whole life. When the verdict came, it was quick. Guilty on all counts. Patterson didn't look at us as they let him out. He kept his eyes fixed straight ahead, the same cold gaze he'd had in every meeting, every hearing, every confrontation. But I saw the tremor in his hands, the way his shoulders slumped slightly as the bailiff took his ARM. He'd lost. After 15 years of getting away with everything, he'd finally lost. S.A. Ra let out a breath I didn't know she'd been holding. Mark pulled her into a hug, and I joined them. The three of us standing in the middle of the courthouse hallway like we were the only people in the world. "It's over," S.A. Ra said. Her voice was hollow, like she didn't quite believe it yet. "It's over," I said. "He's going away for a long time." We drove home in silence. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the kind of sunset that made you forget there was anything wrong in the world. S.A. Ra leaned her head against the window, her eyes closed. Mark drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my knee. And I sat in the passenger seat, watching the familiar our streets roll by, thinking about how strange it was to have everything finally be done. The house was quiet when we walked in. The same house we'd almost lost. The same kitchen where S.A. Ra had first put her folder on the table. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. We'd been through too much for things to ever feel the same again. "We should celebrate," Mark said. "Order something. Open a bottle of wine." "I don't think I can celebrate," S.A. Ra said. "I think I just need to sleep." She went upstairs, her footsteps slow and heavy on the stairs. Mark watched her go, then turned to me. "She's exhausted." "We all agree," I said. "We've been running on empty for months." "I know, but she's been CA-ring more than the rest of us." She's been CA-ring the weight of everything. The evidence, the testimony, the fear are that she'd fail. He shook his head. I don't know how she did it. I do, I said. She did it because she had to. Because if she didn't, she would have spent the rest of her life wondering what would have happened if she'd tried. Mark pulled me into a hug. You did it too, Ellen. You finally did it. I know, I said. I just wish it hadn't taken so long. The next few weeks were a blur of adjustments. Sta route looking for a new job, her reputation restored by the trial's outcome. Mark found a position at a small manufacturing company. Less money, but less stress. The kind of job that let him come home at a reasonable hour. I spent my days in the garden, pulling weeds and planting flowers, trying to find some kind of peace in the simple rhythm of the EA artage that we still got calls. Some were from journalists who wanted follow-up interviews, people who'd been following the case and wanted to know how we were doing. Others were from strangers who'd been affected by Patterson's crimes, people who'd lost pensions or savings or trust in the system. I spoke to as many as I could, because I knew what it was like to feel helpless, to feel like no one was listening. But there were also calls from people who weren't grateful. People who'd been friends with Patterson, who'd benefited from his schemes, who saw us as the villains. I ignored those calls, deleted the messages, and tried not to let them get to me. It wasn't always easy, but I was running. One evening, about a month after the trial ended, Ra came downstairs with a letter in her hand. She'd been sorting through her old files, getting rid of the evidence she no longer needed, and she'd found something she wanted to show me. Mom, I found this in the bottom of my folder, she said. It's the first note I ever wrote about Patterson. The day I realized something was wrong. She handed me the note. It was on a scrap of paper, the kind of scrap you pulled from a notebook when you didn't have anything else handy. The handwriting was messy, the words rushed and half-formed. These numbers don't add up. I think someone is taking money. I don't know who. I don't know why, but I'm going to find out. I read the note twice, then looked up at Ra. You wrote this 18 months ago. Almost 2 years now. I kept it because I wanted to remember what it felt like. The day I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore. Does it still feel that way? Ra thought about it. It feels different now. I'm not SCA read the same way I was. I'm still SCA read, but it's a different kind of fear. It's the fear of not doing enough, of not being enough. Not the fear of being destroyed. I folded the note and handed it back to her. That's growth. That's what it looks like. Ra smiled, a real smile, the first one I'd seen in weeks. I guess it is. Mark came in from the kitchen, ring a tray of tea and keys. I thought we could sit together. Just the three of us. No phones, no paperwork, no investigations. That sounds perfect, I said. That we sat in the living room. The same living room where we'd had so many difficult conversations over the past few months. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across the floor. The clock ticked in the hallway, steady and patient, measuring the time we'd spent and the time we had left. Dad, Ra said. Do you think we'll ever go back to normal? The way things used to be? Mark considered the question. Normal is overrated. We were normal before, and normal didn't work. We were all keeping secrets, all pretending things were fine when they weren't. I don't want to go back to that. What do you want? I want this, he said, gesturing at the three of us. I want us to be honest with each other. I want us to be there for each other. I want us to be a family. Ra reached over and took his hand. We are a family. We've always been a family. We just forgot for a while. We didn't forget, I said. We were SCA red, but we're not SCA red anymore. We sat together as the light faded, watching the shadows grow longer across the floor. I thought about my mother's clock, about all the Sundays I'd wounded, about the years I'd spent trying to keep everything in order. I'd thought order was the same as safety, that if I kept everything neat and tidy, nothing bad would happen. But I'd been wrong. Bad things happened anyway, and the only way to survive them was to face them together. The next morning, I woke up early and wound the clock. The mechanism was smooth and familiar, the same motion I'd done every Sunday for 32 years. But it felt different now. The weight of the guilt had lifted, and I could see the clock for what it was, just a clock. A reminder of time passing, but not a prison. Not a burden. Ra came downstairs while I was making breakfast. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, the kind of comfortable clothes she hadn't worn in months. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the table, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in YRS. What are your plans for today? I asked. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'm going to read a book, maybe take a walk. I'm not going to think about Patterson or the trial or any of it. That sounds perfect. She smiled. I know. I've been waiting for this day for a long time. Mark came down a few minutes later, his hair still mussed from sleep. He kissed my cheek and sat down next to Sa. What's for breakfast? Whatever you want, I said. We have time. We ate breakfast together, the three of us, talking about nothing important. Sa talked about a book she'd been wanting to read. Mark talked about a project at his new job. I talked about the garden, about the flowers I'd planted and the ones I wanted to plant next. It was ordinary. It was mundane. And it was the best breakfast I'd had in YRS. Later that afternoon, Sa and I went for a walk. The weather was YRM, the kind of day that made you remember why you loved spring. We walked in comfortable silence, past the houses and the trees, past the playground where Sa used to swing when she was little. I've been thinking, Sa said, about what comes next. What happens to us? What do you mean? I mean, we've been fighting so hard for so long. And now it's over. And I don't know what to do with myself. I thought about that. I thought about all the YRS I'd spent crying the guilt, all the nights I'd lain awake wondering if I should have done something different. And now, when it was finally over, I didn't know what to do with myself either. We figure it out, I said. We take it one day at a time. We are in to be ordinary again. Is that possible after everything we've been through? I think so, I said. It won't be the same as it was before, but it can be good. We just have to give it time. Sa stopped walking and turned to face me. Mom, I need to tell you something. Something I've been thinking about for a while. What is it? I'm going to help people. Not the way I did with Patterson. Not by investigating and testifying, but by teaching. I'm going to become a professor. I'm going to teach accounting, and I'm going to teach ethics. I'm going to teach the next generation not to make the same mistakes we made. I looked at my daughter, and I saw the woman she'd become. The woman who'd root with a note on a scrap of paper and ended up taking down a corrupt system. The woman who'd refused to stay silent, who'd refused to give up, who'd fought until the very end. That's perfect, I said. That's exactly what you should do. Sa smiled, and I saw the same spark I'd seen when she was a little girl, the same determination that had ride her through all the hard times. She was going to be okay. She was going to be more than okay. She was going to be someone who made a difference. That we walked home as the sun root to set. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, the same colors I'd seen the day the trial ended. I thought about all the things I'd lost, all the things I'd gained, all the time I'd spent running from the truth. And I realized that I didn't regret any of it. Not the fear, not the guilt, not the YRS of silence. Because it had all led to this. To my daughter, standing tall and proud. To my husband, steady and strong. To me, finally at peace. We walked through the front door, and the house was YRM and familiar. Mark was in the kitchen, making dinner. The clock ticked in the hallway, steady and patient, marking the passage of time. And for the first time in 15 years, I listened to it and felt nothing but gratitude that we were going to be okay. We were going to figure it out. We were going to be ordinary again. And that was going to be enough. The sun set outside the window, casting long shadows across the floor. I sat down at the table with my family, and I knew, with a certainty I hadn't felt in YRS, that everything was going to be all right. The trial ended, and we went home. That was the strangest party, the most ordinary party. We went home, and we ate dinner, and we slept in our own beds, and we woke up the next morning to the same sunlight through the same windows. Nothing had changed, and everything had changed. Sa found a teaching position at the community college. Not the big university she'd once dreamed of, but a place where she could make a difference. She stood in front of classrooms full of young people and told them about the numbers, about the patterns, about the cost of staying silent when you know something is wrong. She told them about me, about her grandmother's clock, about the 15 YRS she spent watching me say, RRY guilt I didn't deserve. She told them everything. Mark kept his new job, the one with less money and less stress. He came home at 5 every evening and worked in the garden, planted tomatoes and peppers and the roses I'd always wanted. We sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun go down, talking about nothing in particular. It was ordinary and quiet, and exactly what we needed. I stopped winding the clock. Not because I'd forgotten or because I'd given up, but because I didn't need it anymore. The clock was just a clock, not a measure of guilt or regret. It told time, and that was all it did. I kept it because it was my mother's, because it reminded me of her, but I no longer needed it to remind me of what I'd lost. Patterson is in prison now. I don't think about him much, not the way I used to. He's a shadow in the background, a memory that fades a little more each day. The people he hurt are still healing, still counting the cost of his greed. But the money is being returned, slowly, through the courts. The pensions are being restored. The system is fixing itself, one step at a time. That we still have bad days. Days when Ra wakes up with the old fear, are the certainty that something is about to go wrong. Days when Marksta residential at his hands and wonders if he could have done more. Days when I lie awake and think about all the years I wasted being afraid. But those days are fewer now. They come less often, and they don't last as long. We're ordinary people again. That's what we wanted. That's what we fought for. Not fame or fortune or recognition, but the simple peace of an ordinary life. A house with a ticking clock, a daughter who's finally free, a husband who's finally at rest. The sun sets, and we watch it together. The three of us, sitting on the porch, not saying much. The silence is comfortable now, not heavy. The weight is gone. This is what I fought for. This is what I finally found.